So Grey Knights are starting to make their presence felt in tournaments. Let's take a look at some of the best lists that people have come up with so far, and how the Knights of Tyson are putting their new toys into action in game. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where today we're talking Grey Knights and the top tournament lists that have come out so far with their brand new and shiny codex. In the video we'll just be taking a look at 3 different lists that have all placed pretty highly at grand tournaments. Definitely some common themes emerging for the best way to play Grey Knights in 9th, but it's pretty interesting to see the different takes that different people have. In the video we'll talk through the 3 lists and some of the choices and why I think they were taken. So first up we have a Mass Interceptors list by Matthew Duggan, who used it to take 4th at Dasama War GT, with a truly enormous amount of teleport hopping Grey Knights. I must admit, out of all the units in the codex, the Interceptors were one of the ones that most caught my eye in the new update. Strike squads are amazing, particularly with hammer hands, but seeing as they have already very decent melee and shooting, even without 4 rerolls to wound, the Interceptors perhaps seemed one of the best ways to fill the bodies, as just for a single point per model you get an entire teleport jump pack, addressing perhaps the biggest weakness of strike squads in their slow movement and low threat range. Certainly doesn't seem like too bad an idea just to take an absolute maximal amount of them, for a bunch of fast moving and hard hitting threats jumping around the board casting psychic powers. The list is made out of a single Rapier's battalion. I think they're looking like perhaps the strongest brotherhood to take competitively. They're the ones that can get an extra attack with their psychic power and exploding 6s to hit with their stratagem. Just amps up the already very proficient Grey Knight melee. To lead the troops there's a chaplain with Words of Power and Gate of Infinity. Words of Power being the one that allows you to get extra wounds on 6s to wound, and also double down on any wounds that you might have got from the Tide of Convergence. It makes any one of the standard sword or halberd armed models an enormous threat capable of obliterating virtually anything in its path, particularly the ones with hammer hand with full rerolls to wound. On top of that, he's also got the Unyielding Anvil trait for an aura of Obsec, really not bad in combination with Interceptors or Purifiers, and the Heroism's Favour, Wisdom of the Prognosticars. That's a once per game heroic intervention for any one unit within 12 inches. Again, really handy to have in the centre of a battle line, as it means that your opponent then can't afford to go too close to any of your scary combat units and steal objectives from them. Also along to lead the troops is Caldor Drago. He takes the Gate of Infinity, Sanctuary and Warp Shaping, and he's just all around strong with great melee and awesome invul save, nice rerolls and all around good psychic powers. He also allows you to overcome that single Grandmaster in 1 detachment restriction, as he doesn't count as a Grandmaster being the faction's leader. For the squads those guys have to lead, there are 3 units of strike squads, each with 4 halberds and 1 warding stave, allowing them that 5+ invul save stratagem should they need it, and a unit of purifiers all with swords. I'm going to imagine that at least some of those are mounted in the Rhino, giving them a bit more mobility and setting up a battlefield bunker that they can charge out of in the middle of the board. There are then these 3 maxed out units of Interceptors, 10 men in each, mainly armed with halberds and 1 warding stave, though half of 1 unit has taken falchions instead for a flurry of low strength attacks. They could potentially be combat squadded if necessary, if you wanted a whole bunch of MSU as opposed to a few really hard hitting bricks. Finally there's a unit of cheap servitors which are great for actions, objectives and secondaries. And then there are 2 Nemesis Dreadnought chassis, a Grandmaster and a normal one, both equipped with what seems to be the standard build for them in Nemesis Greatsword, Gatling Silencer and Heavy Psy Cannon. The Dreadnought chassis is really efficient just on its base points cost, and I think that each one of those upgrades is easily well worth the points for the extra damage that it gives you in shooting or melee. It's hard to turn down 6 strength 8 multi-damage shots for just 20 points, and the same with the Gatling Silencer for 12 strength 5 shots. They've also both got teleporters, allowing them access to some handy stratagems such as teleport shunting or falling back to shoot. Focusing on that Grandmaster though, a ludicrously upgraded Dreadnought Grandmaster seems to be pretty much an auto-include for competitive Grey Knight lists now. It's not really too hard to see why, to be honest. You get a ton of scary and durable firepower hitting on 2s, and I'd argue that the Sigil of Exigence and Servant of the Throne just take him to the next level over the standard Dreadnoughts. The Sigil is just a hilariously annoying relic that allows your model to suddenly deep strike and teleport away whenever your opponent fires some shooting at them that you don't want to take the damage of. It means that they could level some really heavy guns at the Dreadnought, and then he could just vanish behind line of sight blocking terrain, and keep himself 100% safe. If he does want to maintain this position though, or once that sigil has already been used, he can then buy himself a turn of 3+ invul with a Servant of the Throne Wisdom of the Prognosticars. That basically gives him a 3+ invul save for a turn, which combined with a command reroll would allow you to weather a ludicrous amount of attacks. Finally, just to get the most out of his melee, he also has the First to the Fray ability with +1 to advance and charge, and when he gets there he double dips on warlord traits with a stratagem, the Hammer of Righteousness for +1 to wound on the charge as well. This Grandmaster Dreadnought is just a horrendous threat to try and deal with. Awesome shooting, awesome combat, and 2 incredibly powerful defensive tricks that are going to make it a real challenge to kill. Overall, a ton of fast moving and hard hitting threats, and it is quite cool to see a whole bunch of interceptors being taken. I did have a feeling that they were going to be quite strong. All the units here base stats are pretty amazing. Never mind all the buffs or just raw damage they can do with the Grey Knight Psychic phase, there'll be a ton of amped up damage and stacked mortal wounds coming out of these squads. For the second army of the day, this list is by Carlos Kaiser, 4th at the Hammer of Wrath GT. This one's quite similar in a fair few ways to the first list. It is again built around a Rapier's battalion, again led by a combination of a Chaplain, Grandmaster and Dreadnought, and Caldor Drago. There's a few small switch-ups between the powers. It's the Chaplain that has Vortex of Doom this time. The Grandmaster takes the Ghostly Bonds trait and doesn't bother to buy him in the 2 Warlord traits. Perhaps the most defining thing about this one is the use of Terminator squads. There's 2 Terminator squads in the Trooper section, each equipped with 4 halberds and 1 warding stave. It's quite nice for them to see some play. A lot of people do seem to be writing them off in favour of massed strike marines. It looks like the Terminators are being supported by an apothecary with a demon hammer. He'll be able to give them some healing, feel no pain, and the potential to resurrect a model or 2 from the dead if it makes sense. And he takes that Heroism's Favour heroic intervention ability and the Advance and Charge Warlord trait. It's a pretty credible threat in his own right as he carries a Nemesis Demon Hammer. Otherwise for the squads there's a really hefty amount of interceptors again. Not quite the maximum amount, there's only 25 rather than 30, but still a very hefty amount indeed. Finally there's a single squad of Strike Marines, 2 squads of Servitors, and 2 Rhinos. I must admit, until having looked at the Rhinos datasheet and the Interceptors keywords, I thought that Interceptors counted as jump infantry and wouldn't be able to ride in the Rhinos, but it seems that I was completely mistaken on that. You could have a pretty hefty threat range, or even just bonus movement turn 1 just from getting out of the Rhino, by hiding these very fast jump troops inside the armoured hull. Overall, another pretty cool list, interesting to see both the similarities and the differences, and nice to see some Grey Knight Terminators achieving some success. Finally, last but not least, we have a fairly different Grey Knight build, this one going all in on the Nemesis Dreadknights. This one's by David McGeever, who led it to take 3rd at the Kent Wargames GT. Again, we still see a Rapier's battalion in the list, but that's also backed up by a Swordbearer's Spearhead as well. The Swordbearers being the other Brotherhood that I was perhaps most interested in. They can get some really very hefty vehicle shooting synergy. Between their stratagem and psychic power, they can add +1 to hit and +1 to wound for all enemy vehicles trying to shoot down 1 unit. With 18 general purpose side shots coming out of every Dreadknight, that's going to make something very dead. For the Swordbearer's Spearhead, we have 3 standard Nemesis Dreadknights, each again with the standard build of Greatsword Silencer and Heavy Psycannon, and one of them takes a Dreadknight Teleporter for a few extra points. The Swordbearer's Grandmaster only has the Servant of the Throne, that 3+ invul save for a turn, and he isn't souped up with anything else, he just has the Empiric Amplification and Vortex of Doom. Over in the Rapier's battalion, there's another very similar, quite stacked Grandmaster Dreadknight. He has the same 2 powers, and also takes first to the fray, Unyielding Anvil for OBSEC, and the Sigil of Exigence for that teleportation ability. He also takes another one of the more interesting Wisdom of the Prognosticars upgrade, called the Foretelling of Locus. That's the one that allows you to redeploy 3 units at the start of the game. So say, if the opponent has out-deployed your Dreadknight wing, you now will know whether you have first turn or not, and can either try and hide them all, or put them all into maximum strike range, depending on what's best from the deployment as you see it. Finally, there's Lord Caldor Drago, leading still a very hefty amount of power armoured bodies into battle. There's 4 units of strike squads with the swords, and 3 min units of interceptors also with the swords. Again, between all their rerolls and the Rapier's buffs, any one of those can be an enormous threat to anything that they can catch. I must admit, I do really like this list. Absolutely no wastage whatsoever here. 5 enormous threats in the Dreadknights, and then a very solid amount of very threatening infantry units to back them up. You're not going to be able to kill everything, and anything that you don't kill is going to hit you back very hard. So let me know what you think of the Grey Knights list that have so far proved themselves to be the best around. Is there anything that you particularly like or would do differently? I definitely look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you would like to help support the channel, I would just like to mention that I do have an Element Games affiliate link, which is down in the video description below. If you were thinking about picking up any 40k miniatures in the future, Element Games is a very decent discount retailer based in the UK, usually giving anywhere between 10 and 20% off Games Workshop's miniatures. if you were planning to muster some strike squads or dread knights, or any other 40k miniatures. If you did click in the link in the video description before buying something, a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics while not costing you any more when you buy. Can just be a way to help out on things that you were already going to purchase anyway. For people over in the USA and Canada, I do also have an Amazon affiliate link as well. That one works in basically just the same way. Click the link, buy whatever you were going to buy off Amazon anyway, and a small amount goes to help support the channel. Can just be a small way to help out if you'd like to. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.